There is a map sitting in a museum in Istanbul right now that scientists, historians, and military experts cannot fully explain. It was drawn in 1513, and it shows a continent that no one was supposed to know existed for another 307 years. Not just the outline of that continent, the coastline underneath the ice. A coastline that has been completely buried under a mile of frozen ice for at least 6,000 years. So here's the question that keeps me up at night. Who drew this map? And how did they see something that we couldn't see until we invented satellites? The year is 1929. A group of historians are going through a dusty collection of old documents in the Topkapi Palace Library in Istanbul. Most of it is routine. Old papers, old records, nothing special. Then one of them unfolds a large piece of parchment. It stops everything. The document is a map, dated 1513, drawn by an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis. On the surface, it looks like something you'd expect from that time period. Slightly distorted, hand-drawn, with old Arabic notes written in the margins. But the more they look at it, the more uncomfortable they become, because this map shows something that no one in 1513 was supposed to know about. The map clearly shows three things: the western coast of Africa, the eastern coast of South America, and then, stretching along the bottom of the map, a long horizontal landmass. That landmass is Antarctica. And here is where everything gets strange. Antarctica was not officially discovered until 1820. Not explored, not mapped, not even rumored in European knowledge in any serious way. It was just not there yet. It didn't exist in the world that Piri Reis was living in. But somehow, his map shows it, and not just a vague blob. The shape matches the actual coastline of Antarctica with a level of accuracy that made modern researchers deeply uncomfortable when they first compared it using 20th-century cartographic tools. Charles Hapgood, a professor at Keene State College in New Hampshire, spent years analyzing this map in the 1950s and 60s. He brought in mathematicians and cartographers. What they found was that the map appeared to show Antarctica not as it looks today, buried under ice, but as it would have looked thousands of years ago, before the ice built up. The specific region shown matches what geologists call Queen Maud Land. And the last time that coastline was free of ice? At least 6,000 years ago. Some estimates push it even further back. Think about what that means for a moment. 6,000 years ago, there were no sailing ships capable of reaching Antarctica. There were no navigation tools capable of measuring longitude accurately. There was no technology that could give you a bird's-eye view of the Earth's surface from above. The first civilizations on Earth were just beginning to form. People were still figuring out how to write things down, and yet, somehow, someone had already mapped the bottom of the world. Here is where Piri Reis himself becomes important. He didn't claim to be some kind of genius who discovered all of this on his own. In the notes he wrote directly on the map, he explained his process. He said he compiled his map from a collection of older source maps, around 20 of them, by his own account. Some of those sources, he said, came from the library of Alexander the Great. Some were even older than that. Now that sounds like the kind of thing someone says to make their work seem more impressive. But the detail that's hard to dismiss is the mathematical accuracy of the map itself. The map uses a specific style of projection. When researchers analyzed the geometry, they found that the map seems to be drawn from a center point located near Cairo, Egypt. The proportions and distances only make sense if the person drawing it, or whoever created the original source maps, was working with a view of the Earth from directly above that point. That is not something you can do from a boat. That is not something you can do from a mountain. That is something you can only do if you have some way of seeing the entire surface of the Earth from a great height. Longitude is another issue entirely. Accurately measuring longitude was one of the hardest problems in the history of navigation. European sailors were getting it wrong for centuries. The British government literally offered a massive financial prize in the 1700s to anyone who could solve the longitude problem. It wasn't cracked until 1759. But the Piri Reis map gets longitude largely correct, for both the Atlantic coastlines and, most disturbingly, for Antarctica. How do you measure longitude in 4000 BC? How do you map a continent from above in 4000 BC? Nobody has a clean answer for that. Climax. Pivotal moment. There are a few directions people go when they try to explain this. The most common academic response is that the Antarctic portion of the map is actually a distorted representation of South America's southern tip, or a theoretical landmass that ancient geographers believed must exist to balance the continents in the north. That's a reasonable argument. Ancient Greek philosophers did theorize about a large southern landmass long before anyone had seen it. But the problem with that explanation is the accuracy. A theoretical landmass should look vague and approximate. What Piri Reis drew matches the real coastline too specifically for that to feel satisfying. The other explanation, the one that's harder to accept but harder to dismiss, is that there was once a civilization on this planet, before recorded history, that was far more advanced than we assume. A civilization that had mapped the entire Earth. That had solved mathematics we didn't solve until the 18th century. That, for whatever reason, disappeared. Maybe the end of the last ice age wiped them out. Maybe the sea levels rising erased most of their coastal cities and their records along with them, and all that survived of their knowledge were fragments. Pieces of maps that got copied and recopied and passed from library to library, from civilization to civilization, until one Ottoman admiral in 1513 compiled them into a single document and accidentally preserved a ghost of a world we don't remember. The Piri Reis map is still in Istanbul. You can look at a high-resolution image of it right now. The notes in the margins are still there. The impossible coastline is still there. We have never found the original source maps he referenced. We have never found the civilization that would have needed to exist to create them. We have never fully explained how a 16th century document accurately depicts a landmass buried under ice since before the pyramids were built. It might be a coincidence. It might be a misinterpretation. It might be exactly what it looks like. A reminder that the story of human civilization is far older and far stranger than the one we were taught. We are not necessarily the most advanced people who ever lived. We are just the ones who are here right now, looking back at a map we cannot explain, drawn by someone we cannot name, showing a world we are only beginning to remember. Subscribe to Midnight Curiosities.